Hello, everybody. I'm Larry Johnson, your host for Eight Principles Voices, and I have with me today Marcelino Ambruzio, and I hope I did that correctly. My Italian's not the best, and but this young man really struck me as someone who's going places, who's purposed, who's focused, who understands what the job is ahead of him. You're going, what the hell does he do? Well, he has his own marketing firm that works primarily with faith-based organizations, and but also works a broader thing with nonprofits as well and for profits. So but he's focused on his mission. And this is where I want to talk to him today. So, welcome, Marcelino.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me, Larry.
Uh, we've gone through this before, but could you tell the listeners and the viewers just a little bit about your background and how you came to do what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, so I run a marketing firm, as Larry said, called Sherwood Fellows. We help faith-based organizations with their marketing needs. We have a vision for renewing Christian civilization, and so every business owner and nonprofit owner who shares that common vision is, a good person for our client list. But we primarily think in like terms of brand, um, creative, and so we help a lot on the like development of new initiatives, creating new brands, helping communication, and then we'll come in after we do the like lay those foundations and help to do the lead gen aspect of the marketing as well. So that's what we do. How did I get to doing that? I grew up in a Catholic media household. So my dad is a Catholic theologian, and now both my brother and my sister are in Catholic media in some regard. So I kind of have that in my blood, but outside of the bloodline, it's um, just being around great Catholic community and nonprofits throughout my life through being in contact with my dad and then doing ministry myself. I just have such a heart for helping, um, not just helping people like spiritually, but also helping them with their material needs, helping them with, um, sorry, excuse me, their their real life challenges. And I think that, Christians have a strong history of doing that throughout, you know, yeah, throughout our history. So when I was out of college and in ministry, though, I realized that the ministries that I was involved with were very, very limited in the area of marketing and media. I mean, especially in the Catholic world, if you've ever been, or, encountered a Catholic media company like EWTN
That's what
or
I was
your
thinking of.
local
Yes.
like Catholic newspaper, like these organizations tend to be pretty clueless as it relates to the 21st century. And so I just saw a great need there. There wasn't much in terms of like there weren't very many people trying to help because obviously like nonprofits can't pay very much and all of that. And so my brother and I started taking on clients. One thing led to another, and in 2015 we left our full-time ministry jobs and began building this company in earnest. So that's, the high level, but yeah, I'm just happy to go deeper into any of our like philosophy or case studies or anything else you'd like to ask about there.
Well, I want to explore a little more personally, if I may. Um, I love the story you told me about when your dad accepted the professorship at
Yeah.
Dallas, and that you had been in an evangelical Catholic community, and that you were sort of pulled out of that and were looking around for a new identity. And as often will do young men of your age, who are reasonably good looking, will form a rock band. All right.
Haha. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'll tell you the personal side of the story. Get out of the business hat for a second. So my dad and my mom met in the Catholic Charismatic Renewal in the Northeast New England in 1970s. So at the time, all of these ecumenical Christian communities were forming, and so they joined an ecumenical Christian community, which meant we lived in a neighborhood with other Catholics. Not everybody's Catholic, but most of them were, and um, there were there was a school that we went to. There were lots of community events. Um, and so I just felt like I was, well, like I was in a tribe that I belonged to and gave me a sense of identity. And when my dad got a job teaching at the University of Dallas, he moved our family down. I didn't know this, but there were some issues with the intentional communities at the time. I mean, I was 6, so I don't really know like all of the ins and outs of that, but the 70s were a little bit of a cultish era, so these communities took on some of that kind of like weird culty vibes, and my dad was looking for us to um, yeah, just kind of define our identity a little bit more as a family. And so we moved down to Texas, which is a very like Baptist kind of Protestant Anglo culture. And I didn't fit in at all, at all. I didn't know the movies that the other kids watched. I didn't know the books that they read. And I also like my family just, we had a bunch of kids. We cared a lot more about our backyard than our front lawn. There was just a lot about our family that was very Italian and kind of like ethnic and Catholic that were just very different than the way that the suburban flower mound families did things. The kind of keeping up with the Joneses attitude just wasn't how we did things. And so,
Oh, I can
um,
picture this, Marcelino. I can
yeah,
picture this.
yeah, I have stories about that too. I could tell you, but like
No,
for
see,
instance,
well, go ahead,
go ahead.
please. No, go ahead.
Eh, Yeah, for instance, we we didn't pay hundreds of dollars to have other people come and, deck out our lawn with Christmas lights and blow up animals and stuff during Christmas. Like that was not something that, the Catholic theologian professor was gonna pay for. And so
maybe,
we would
maybe a
go ahead.
nativity that he himself put up out front. Okay,
Exactly. Right.
but
Well, not him. Like he's gonna have his kids do it. So
right, his
they'd
kids.
send us out with like, half of our lights are like blinking colored, half of them are like white. It's just like, well, we couldn't afford to buy more, so we just sort of pieced this together this year. And so we
Mhm.
would get the strangest looks from our neighbors. We would get notes like, I don't get it in our mailbox, but just, not any serious like um social rejection, but just, there was just a sense in which we're different here.
Well, one of the things that I grew up as Anglo Catholic, not full blooded Catholic, all right,
Yeah.
but one of the things that I noticed that I suspect that they reacted to if you were doing it liturgically correct, and that is as you put out the nativity scene, the various pieces showed up at different times as you
Yeah.
approached through Advent and then Christmas, and then the Magi didn't appear to the end,
Right.
and rather than everything out there as soon as the
Right.
day after Thanksgiving, so
Yeah. Yeah, we don't do Christmas. We do Advent and then Christmas, right? Like,
that's right.
so
That's
we're
right.
we're not taking our stuff down until, a month after everyone else. But
January
yeah,
5th.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think that what that experience gave me is just a sense for how important um how important not just community. I think that when people hear the term community, they have this image of like, I don't know, just potluck dinners at the parish hall or whatever, but that's not what I mean by community. I mean more of a tribal identity that you have a
Yeah.
sense of belonging. This is what we do, and this is not how the other people do it. And um, we live in a in this kind of intensive relationship, and I think that like most organizations have really in the modern age like lost a sense of what identity really used to
Hmm.
mean for people. But it is really at the root of what makes not only great community, but great businesses, which is, you know, why we focus a lot on brand development. Because identity is really, that's the foundation of everything. So, um, fast forward to, getting dropped into public school when I was in seventh grade. Um, Also very unprepared for that experience. And um, because there weren't very many other Catholics or really even strong Christians going to the school. Um, I just I just learned that in order to get social belonging and community, I had to really begin to like adjust my behavior um, and my belief systems. I had to, play down my Catholic identity and my my moral system in order to get girls to like me. And I wasn't going to do that the traditional sort of Texan way by joining a football team, because if I stood up, you could tell that I'm 5'6". Um, I weighed like 90 pounds, something like that at the time. So my pathway to girls' hearts was going to be through art and music. I'm going to pick up the guitar. And so I started a rock band. Um, we became very successful. Um, we were, you know, by the end of high school, I was planning a tour. I wasn't going to go to college. We were getting scouted by um, a number of different record labels. Well, I'm going to get here, but when my band broke up, the other guys went on to a huge career in music, joined the same record label as like Fall Out Boy and many of these other sort of punk rock bands at the time. And we, my brother and I had a different calling. So I'll get to that part in a second. But um, during this whole process, like I was still going to youth group, I was still engaged in the church, but it was a double life that I was living. I was, repenting for my debaucherous behavior, um, on, on Sunday at youth group, and then like going out and doing the whole week over again, chasing girls. I was dating multiple girls at the time, which is a recipe for disaster. Lots
Oh,
and lots of
yes,
drama there.
it is.
Um,
Yes.
and um, my relationships with my family was also deteriorating. I was getting brought back by the cops, which thank God they never arrested me, because I think my life would have been really different if that had happened. Um, and not anything like drugs or alcohol, but just I had this like just very rebellious resentment, um, behavior that I was acting out of, because of what I had perceived kind of growing up of like being socially ostracized and not fitting in. And so I just would like go out to neighborhoods and knock over all their garbage cans. And I thought that was funny, but it was actually coming out of a kind of dark
Mhm.
place. Um,
Yeah.
and so the last week, or the last week before this big show that was going to kind of kick off the next stage of our career in music. My mom, like, well, one thing, I started to see some very negative and dark things going on in the music scene that I hadn't really been fully aware of before. Like, um, friends in the band that were just, I'm not going to go into all the details, but doing some pretty dark stuff. And that scared me a little bit. And then my mom came to our show, and after, which she didn't come to these because she was very like, well, yeah, I mean, she was busy taking care of five kids, so she didn't have a ton of time. But they also, my parents didn't really support the band. They could see where it was going. There was a lot of tension about it. And so after my mom came to that show, my brother and I came back home maybe 2 a.m. in the morning, and my mom was still awake, which was very bad news. You don't want that. Uh, she has this like pursed lips look that's like, oh man, we're gonna ha hear it today. And
So,
she,
so, so, what does she
go
call
ahead.
you when she's annoyed? Uh,
Well, at the time I went by Mark. So, Mark and Anthony, Anthony was my twin brother.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she would Marcelino, should the full name.
No, no, no. Yeah, like she didn't do the full name, unfortunately. I feel like that would make the story better, but it doesn't.
Okay, all right, okay.
Um, yeah, so she told us, "Hey, this band is taking you in a direction that you're not going to be able to come back from very soon. Like very soon you're going to look up and you're going to wonder how you got to where you got. Um, and you're not going to be happy about it. And you're
And
not going to be able to find your way back."
she put it to you just like that.
I don't remember the exact words, but it was something along those lines.
Well, that paints a very ominous picture. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
like, oh, you're doing bad things, you need to reform yourself, or blah 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 blah. It was like it's taking you places that you won't be able to return from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which she was absolutely right about that. Um, which I'll come back to in a minute. But I had a after, seeing what was going on with my friend group, um, some of the things that these people were getting into, the drugs, like the sexual behavior that was going on. Like I just knew in my soul she was right. And so my brother and I were in a bunk bed, and he was, up top and I was on the bottom, and I could hear him rolling around. Um, and he could kind of hear me not being able to go to sleep either. And so I just said, "Hey man, like, do you want to pray about this?" And he was like, "Yeah," which we didn't do that. That's kind of like an unwritten rule. Um, you don't open up that much. Um, and I like we said together, "Hey, like God, if you want our band, you can have it, and if you want our lives, you can have it." And that gave us the peace that we needed to go back to
Mhm.
sleep. Next day, pick up the phone, and it's Kyle, our lead guitarist, and he says, "Hey, we don't really like the direction the band is going. We want to play a different kind of music. You guys are um kind of being assholes," which we were. We were pretty like dominating leaders at the time. And we're going to take the band money and we're going to go in a different direction. Peace. And then Anthony's girlfriend called him and broke up with him. And then my girlfriend called me and broke up with me. And
There you go.
within one day, like the entire our entire lives were just like completely disrupted. The rug was pulled out from under us, and we had to rethink every social relationship, like where we're head, like our entire career plan, and it was pretty overwhelming.
Well, the timing is
I,
just incredible. The prescience of the whole thing.
yeah, it
Um,
was wild. It was wild.
mhm.
So after that, my brother and I went to seminary, Catholic seminary, which is kind of an insane 180, right? It's like we're like these punk rockers with pink hair and skinny jeans that are ripped up and like showing up at St. John, this Midwestern seminary, St. John Vianney Seminary in Minnesota. But for us, it was a lot more like going to rehab than it was like, serious discernment. Um, but that formation that I received there led us into ministry, which like my brother and I both began doing high school youth ministry after we graduated from college, just
Mhm,
because we had such a heart for helping young people navigating the same kinds of things that we were going through.
mhm. Now,
But
were you in when
good.
you were in seminary? Were you ever on the priesthood track? Is that where you were headed?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're in seminary as a
Okay,
Catholic, that is the
that's
path.
what I
So
think.
yes. Yeah.
When I was working for Ketchum, the consulting firm, at one point I did a campaign for St. Michael's College in Burlington, Vermont, which is, I
Yeah.
forget the mail order that sponsors it, but I was in the advancement office. That's where I was sitting. And it was a first floor office, and people were walking back and forth out on the sidewalk all the time. And there were several ladies in the office. And every time this one particular priest would walk down the sidewalk, he ran some of the youth groups and things like that. They'd always say, "There he goes, Father, what a waste.
Yeah.
Father, what a waste." Very,
Yeah.
very good looking, athletic. There goes Father, what a
Yeah.
waste, right there.
Huh. So funny. Yeah. No, it's a
Well,
lot of jokes like that for
you
sure.
obviously didn't pursue it the whole way then.
No. Yeah, I realized relatively quickly that um what my vision was for the priest or well, what I thought the priesthood was and what it really is were two different things, and that I had a calling to be more of on the front lines of the church, which is the lay, the lay people are on the front lines. The priests
Yeah.
are, giving respite and delivering sacraments. And so, like, I think my calling now, what I'm doing now, is very much in line with what I
Hmm.
discerned and what I
Yeah.
learned there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
how long did you stay in the seminary?
I was just there for a year. My brother
Okay.
was there for four. I went to a small liberal arts school called Ave Maria, and then came out of that uh, in 2011, started doing youth ministry. But within the Catholic world, at least, there's not really a career path there. It's like, hey, be a youth minister and make $35,000 for the rest of your life. So, and also, like, once you have that on your resume, other companies look at you and think, like, what is this fool doing with their life? Like, they didn't do internships, they did ministry. Like, I'm not hiring this person, you know? So we
Unfortunate but
knew,
true.
yeah. So we knew we had to, like, the only pathway out of this trap that we'd found ourselves in was we've got to start our own thing. So we went and moonlit for another agency in the you know in the Dallas area, which this was crazy. But we both brought in this one agency to consult with our two individual parishes, and the agency presented, like, we helped them to kind of put this presentation together showing that with just a few $100s a month, we could increase attendance at mass by a certain amount and vicariously increase um, the giving of the church by hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And both parishes said no because they didn't know how it's like, they just didn't know how to process it. It was just like such a new thing to think about. Like, this is the very early days of social media. And so the so yeah, we just realized, like, oh man, we've got some big fish to fry here in this culture.
Let me
Good.
pick up something you said, which I think is transferable to the larger nonprofit culture, or even Protestants. And the concept, well, the lack of understanding of what an investment is. Every
Right.
expenditure is seen as an expense
Right.
rather
That's
than,
exactly right.
and this is a revenue generating activity. You know,
Right.
it should, if it's designed properly, return several times over what it actually cost. Um,
Right.
but so many nonprofits of all shapes and sizes and brands don't, they just don't understand that. They see
Right.
everything in terms of an expense. So they equate that. Well, they do the same thing with fundraising too. Well, oh,
Right.
that's an expense. Why should I spend anything? Well, because you're going to get five times that, or you should. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on that point, the expense problem. I think that there's a way in which, especially in the nonprofit space, we think of, because, like, a gift is not always directly attributable to any specific action that you take as an organization.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a big problem in the for-profit space as well, but it's at least more measurable, and people have tools and like ways in which they tend to track their audiences and customers' behavior across multiple platforms. And you can also do
Yeah.
surveys like, how did you find out about us? But when you're talking about big gifts that come from people within a community, a donor community, oftentimes you have no clue like what it was that led them to make that gift. But if you actually really get empathetic and do your research, what you find is that, like, they follow a process that's something like this. Um, I saw your website, um, or someone talked to me about what you're doing. I saw your website. It looked very professional, which they won't necessarily think to say that, but it's a factor in the process, right?
Yeah, it
Like
is.
they are going to vet you in some way. Like
Yeah.
couple seconds looking at your social channels, couple seconds looking at your website. Like, okay, I get it. They look professional. This looks like a serious thing. Then they engage with someone in the organization. If the organization passes that test, they'll have a conversation with you. You give them some sort of material, right? And the relationship begins to take more of a root and an emphasis, but still there's the whole experience of that donor journey is shaped by their impressions that are, generally speaking, a few seconds long, more of an emotional
Yeah.
kind of
Emotive
like
appeal.
yeah, exactly. And so um it's really vital to dress your, well, I mean, we can talk about like why it's vital to dress up your brand, make sure that it looks good, right? And to communicate in a way that's emotional and effective. All of that's important. But I guess that the more important thing to think about here is that um, even even though you can't exactly track whether, oh, I built a new website and um, do I know exactly how much revenue that is ever going to get me in donations? No. Like you're not going to be ever be able to know exactly what the impact of that new website is. However, you can, if you're smart and if you're strategic about it, you can set it up in such a way that you get some data, that you track
Hmm.
behavior, that you can make a good case for it. But either way, there is just an element of risk taking that I
Yeah.
think that nonprofits just have to become comfortable with and have to take. Otherwise, um, you're going to be constantly playing defense, which is what the churches were doing that my brother and I were involved with. Like, donations are going down because the Catholic Church is changing, and we have facilities expenses that are going up, and so yeah, we just can't afford another $300 this month. We're just like, guys, if you don't spend and you don't innovate, you are going to keep going down this track. Like 5 years later, just follow the trends out and see what they look like, you know? Um, so
No, that's where I'm sure we see this in the Catholic world, but also in the Protestant world. That's when you get the answers like, "Well, God will lead us. God will provide." Let's
right,
just put
yeah,
that all on Him passively. We're not responsible for anything. To which I remind them of the parable of the 10 talents. There was the
right,
expectation of proactive action.
right.
Yeah. Um,
So so it was after that that like that agency, there were a number of people in our network that wanted to work with them, but after those experiences, of kind of putting in a lot of work and getting rejections from these Catholic organizations, they didn't want to take on other Catholic work. And then also they were concerned about the impact of having these clients in their portfolio, which turns out was a very real and good, wise decision for them in the long run, because as the last few years, like as political polarization has happened, it's become much more like we've had companies ask us to not list them as clients and not put up anything about them in just be simply because we're Catholic. Not even because like we're politically engaged, though we are a little bit. It's more
Because
that we just
because your
good.
firm's Catholic or before the organization is Catholic?
No, because our firm is Catholic.
Okay. All right.
Like they didn't want to be listed alongside of other Catholic companies or organizations. Um,
Okay.
and we ended up turning that project specifically down that I'm talking about. But we've had a number of kind of sales and client calls that have had that, like we've got to be careful about, being aligned or being seen as being in this universe because we'll get the Eye of Sauron on us. So there are very real ramifications. And anyway, we started taking on these clients on the side, like pro-life organizations and parishes and Catholic young adult groups. And we had no idea what we were doing. We had no training in marketing. We just had a good sense of entrepreneurship and um,
Mm-hmm.
had had done a lot of our own marketing for our band and for different things that we'd started and for our ministries. And so we just took to it naturally, like learned as much as we could, and um, ended up being very, very successful with our, well, not necessarily like financially, we're not making a lot of money, but we have helped or the organizations that we've worked with do very incredible things, punch way above their pay grade. And that's kind of also a part of our name. Like Sherwood Fellows is a very Robin Hood approach. Nonprofits have no money. Um, the the Christian world generally is like not one that where there's a lot of resources, but you're still competing with the rest of the world for attention. And so we're going to steal everybody else's attention for you by being amazing at the creative elements of the process. So
I,
that's our kind of attitude.
well, I wonder, you had the reference of Sauron. I wonder how many people of our listeners understand the origin of that reference. It comes out of the Lord of the Rings, Sauron, the personification of evil. And by the way, you of all, I'm sure know that Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic.
He
Um,
was, yeah,
and of course, he is responsible for leading C.S. Lewis, an agnostic, to faith. And then Lewis tried to get him to publish the Ring, for it took like 12 or 14 years, and Tolkien never thought it was good enough. And like, come on, get it out there, do it, get it out there. And so do you know the group, the literary group they belong to, the Inklings? Did you know
the
about them?
Inklings, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And what I think is interesting, of course, this was in the what 30s, 40s, 50s. And what was her name? What's her name? Dorothy Sayer was invited to be a part of that briefly, and then they decided, this needs to be a boys' club, and so they
Yeah.
kicked her. They kicked her out.
I did not know that story, but that makes me, yeah, that makes me laugh.
Well,
Well,
so
yeah, I mean, they're
uh,
just if you read their letters, they drank a lot and not,
oh
I
yeah,
mean, they would meet at the bar at like 12 p.m. In Oxford to you know, to drink and talk about what they're working on. Um, so definitely a different kind of era for sure.
yeah, and I forgot the official name, but the nickname for the pub was the Bird and the Baby that they went to there in Cambridge. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, they were. And then there's well, you know the story about where C.S. Lewis was living with his brother Warnie. Two old bachelors living together.
right.
And
Yeah,
when Joy Gresham first reached out to C.S. Lewis, and he's a young, attractive divorcee American, when she starts writing him letters, well, they had not seen who she was, and they just listened to this. Well, these are two old middle-aged guys, okay, and at one point, C.S. Lewis is discussing Warnie. Well, should I meet this woman? She wants to meet me. She wants to do that. She wants to do this. And he's reading stuff, and well, she writes poetry, and at that point, Warnie just says, "She'll be barking." You know what that means? She'll be a dog. She'll be
Yeah.
barking. And
Yeah.
two middle-aged men.
Yeah. That's so funny. I didn't know that story either.
Should be barking. And she wasn't. She's a very attractive young woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's hilarious. So now that you've got your business, and how long have you been doing this?
Since 2015.
Okay. So you're serving faith-based nonprofits, both Catholic and Protestant.
Yeah.
Okay. And you do, I'm sure you do right to life and other things. Is there a
Yeah.
sweet spot that you like? Is this something you really like?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that we kind of have a thesis in the same way that other um, that venture firms have a thesis about how they invest their money. We believe that uh, Christian civilization is the vision that is going to rebuild our culture. I think right now, the time that we live in, is one where
Mm-hmm.
um, there is just decay in every area of our world. Um,
I would agree
I
with
wouldn't
that.
say it's like all falling apart really, but like you can just look at the amount of train accidents and airplane accidents and um, things of that nature that can show you that this kind of like era of meritocracy that built up America was strong. Like there was a whole culture that was just very about capability and um, there was a common set of values that tied America together and really enabled us going to Mars, or not going to Mars, sorry, going to the moon and building building our highway system and just all of these like massive achievements of American greatness. That set of values in the era of globalization has um, been it's atrophied, it's eroded. Um, we have a multicultural society that does not share values, and turns out that that actually is um, pretty hard to do business effectively in. Like you've got to always be watching your back. You've got to always be um, looking at like ways to protect yourself from bad actors. And I think that that just comes from what I would call living in a low trust society. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
um, when lying is okay, when sort of, I mean, you big companies put everything that they can in the fine print to more or less like fleece their customers. Like there's just a sense in which like excellence no longer is what and value, delivering value and solving real problems is no longer the driving force behind our culture. Okay, so maybe
Mm-hmm.
you agree with me, maybe you don't. That's fine.
Oh, I
Happy to
do.
like have a
I do.
conversation about that.
Well,
But
Well,
good.
let me give you an example. Now, of course, the technology's changed, but the ethos of creating something like this has not changed. Um, you're younger than I am, but the whole issue, the whole telephone system of the United States, AT&T, Ma Bell, everything was at such a high level, and the performance was always there, and the
Right.
and the hardware was virtually indestructible, and it was always it did what it was supposed to do. And it was when everything began to be deregulated and farmed out, then you got varying levels of performance depending on who
Yeah.
the company was. you know you could have this same levels. Of course, now technology has completely changed, but the whole idea was there was this drive toward excellence. We're the best.
Right.
We
Right.
are, what we do is the very best. um,
Yeah. And now, that so I think that that is a value, right? Like excellence is a value that
mhm,
a culture either has or does not have. And I think for most of history, um, people have not had that value. I think there's a lot of I mean, the reason why America has been excellent is because they valued excellence, uh, on not just because it gives you success, but because of its own sake, like valuing for its
Hmm.
own sake. And I think that that actually comes out of Christianity.
Yes, it
Um,
does.
that's a
Yeah.
value that has um, it comes from the belief that God is watching, and that you don't need to have worldly success for what you do to be valuable. That's a part of the Christian ethos is that God gives you approval, not other people or not the world. And so you do things for the sake of God, not just for the sake of the money. And
Uh,
so even if like we weren't really a Christian culture in the 70s, 60s, 40s, 60s, 70s, those values were still very much held, but they're not anymore. And so to me, part of what like we want to help make happen is a rebirth of Christian culture broadly. And Christian civilization. So what that looks like to me is um, not simply helping people with spiritual ailments, which I think the church has kind of accepted this attitude of like, all right, we do our spiritual stuff, and then like this nonprofit over here does the um, like they help with. Well, here's an example, right? Um, I think Christian schools, that's a very Christian civilizational initiative. Those have lost a lot of they're closing thousands of Catholic schools every year because Catholic schools have not figured out how to live in a model where there's public education available, and you know in the 21st century, all of the changes that have happened since Catholic education really was invented, and so like they're playing catch up in a big way. But the loss of those Catholic schools is the loss of Catholic culture, or Christian schools rather, like it just broadly speaking. Um, it's I think that public schools have um, there is a value system that is being taught. I experienced what that value system was, and it was basically like, um, check these boxes for success, and then whatever else you do doesn't matter. Like pick your poison, um, pursue grow, pursue sexual aggrandizement, and buy all of the cool new shoes, and then you'll be cool. Like that's the value system that's being taught in public schools. And so I want to help Catholic schools rebuild Catholic civilization. I want to help Christian schools rebuild Christian civilization. And that
uh,
is just one example, I think, of our broad thesis that we need we need Christian healthcare companies. We need Christian nonprofits that help Christians with childcare. And um, nonprofit or for profit, I think is actually not a very useful distinction in this kind of setting. Like you're
no,
running a
it isn't.
business,
No,
what
it
what
really
the
isn't.
business model is not as important as like what is it that you're doing, what value are you offering, and what are the values that you're espousing while you're doing it.
You see,
So
for a lot of nonprofits, they don't understand that they have a business model.
right,
And the only difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is the way they distribute excess revenue. That's it.
right,
That's the
right.
only difference. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you play the same rules if you're going to
yeah,
survive. And
right.
something I was going to say about that. I was going to say, about uh, I'll think of it in a second. But um, it was about the schools. Oh, I know what it was. What I'm quite a bit older than you. Okay, we've discussed that. But when I was in the fourth grade, elementary school, for a Thanksgiving assembly, we sang the hymn, Fairest Lord Jesus, in a
Yeah,
public school.
right.
Okay. And it was like, okay, fine. All
Yeah,
right. No big deal. Try that today. Oh my God, I can only imagine. Um,
right. Yeah, there's a very clear, I think if you're paying attention at all, if you are a Christian, you're going to see that our culture is anti-Christian. It is not simply ambivalent towards Christianity. It's like aggressively antagonistic towards Christianity. So,
Hmm.
that's why we need our own institutions. Otherwise, we are going to be we're gonna well yeah, I mean what I saw with myself was that when I went to public school, I in order to fit in with the culture I changed, right? And that's just how people behave. That's the normal way of
Hmm.
behaving as a human being. You need
Hmm.
belonging, you need a sense of like, this is my tribe. And I found that in my skater punk music people. But that doesn't need to be the story, but it is the story for most people. So I want to stem the tide of Christians leaving the church and not feeling like they belonged, not feeling like they had a place. Um, and so every project that we do is supporting that overall, developing institutions and initiatives that support Christian civilization.
Okay, very good. You know,
I'd love to hear your reaction to that, honestly, because I feel like that's actually a pretty um like there could be a lot of questions and possibly critique or criticism of that thesis.
well, it's where you put your stake in the ground, and it's
Yeah,
obvious. I mean, you've told me that you want to pursue excellence. Number
yeah,
one, two, your calling is to stem the degradation of Christian culture and indeed begin to resurrect it in the other direction. That's what you're telling me.
yes,
And
yes,
I mean, someone like Jordan Peterson, he would say, "Well, no, we were in the Enlightenment, and then we went to the postmodernist, and now we're into
right,
this progressive era. It's just all about power. There's nothing else."
right,
And you can, there's really no God or anything reason. The controlling factor is either hedonism or power. Those are the only
right.
two things that are out there. And you're telling me that's not true, which is good. I'm glad you're telling me that. Uh, because I'd feel pretty bleak right about now if that's all there was. Um, so then you offer your clients an alternative to the standard sort of, everything is to get the maximum return at the least cost, and it's not really long term. It's about short term, and it's about
Right.
whatever it takes to get there. Am I right?
Yeah, yep. Yeah,
And
okay. So
you're the
how does this
antithesis of
play out,
that.
right? Yes, absolutely. I think that this attitude that most organizations have toward marketing is a problem that has come out of the loss of our values, right? Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
when power and hedonism is everything, you invest for the short term. You don't care if there's any sort of sustainability to it. You're willing to burn relationships because there's just another one on the other side of you just go on to the next. That nothing works when you come at reality that way. Because
No,
essentially what's going on there is like incredible inefficiency. Um, Everybody is really just kind of fleecing each other back and forth. Um,
it's a
there's not
zero sum
trust,
game. It's a zero
right?
sum game. Now,
But
I don't
we've
know if
kind
you
of accepted that that's how marketing works. So like, I'm going to pay
most of it.
you only if you guarantee me like 3x return tomorrow. Like not even in a week, but um, that attitude is not working. 78% of business owners in a recent study said they're frustrated with their marketing, and that's the reason why. So, the way that we approach marketing, on the other hand, is much more of a long-term relationship with a client. We spend a lot of, well, we kind of ask our clients, like, hey, if you want to do this, you need to pay for strategy upfront. We're going to do strategy. We're going to work on your foundations, your brand, your website, your message. I know that that's uncomfortable. I know that's really hard because you don't know if that's going to have an impact. However, if you are one of our clients, you're going to be willing to like take the time and put in the funds to work on those foundations because once those are done, we're going to be able to help you in a dramatic way over the course of time that you would not have been able to get from any other agency in, in our area. So,
Go through
um,
the
yeah,
painful reflection and make the adjustments. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I've been there. Ugh, sometimes I don't think it's ever going to end. But I was going to say something about this. About
And
that.
like last thing that I would say about that is if you're a really big organization, that is extremely arduous. Like there is a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of stakeholders that are going to have to be involved. But if you're a smaller organization, um, it's not as hard. If you're a solo entrepreneur, like it's not as big of a deal. But it's just it probably is going to feel the same in terms of risk because you have less
Oh
money,
yeah.
you have less time
Hmm.
when you're small. Um, so I think that like no matter what, that's a part of the factor, but it's not like everyone goes through the exact same level of that process that works with us.
No.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes plenty sense. It's not necessarily like turning a battleship. You know,
Yeah,
maybe a cruiser or a sloop.
right.
But you know, so that's it's just the large ship. It has such inertia. Was something I was going to mention to you, but I forget it now. But we'll come back to that, I'm sure. Um, Anything I haven't emphasized enough? Anything you'd like to really say?
Yeah, well, I think that it's always useful for when I'm in these conversations. I think a lot of people want to know like what's something I can do with this, right? So what I would say is if you are a nonprofit and you are trying to figure out how to do marketing effectively, this is one thing that you can do right today, right after you hear this. Get a piece of paper and a pen and put the name of your favorite donor in like at the top of the sheet and write as much as you can about this person. What do they wear? What are they how how do they want to be seen by the people that they're around that they love or that they care about? What's keeping them up at night? What is their like biggest struggle in life right now? What has been a major source of suffering in their past? And just get as close empathetically in your imagination to this audience member. And then um, write the journey as closely as you can of like what they probably, how they came to know you, what their experiences were that probably led them to give. And then ask yourself, once you're done with that, what insights can I glean from this exercise that I can apply and systematize for this type of donor? Do that, and you will see a major change. I guarantee you will see insights that will lead to major changes in how your fundraising process works. So
I can, yeah,
that's my
I can
tool
tell you
for
that.
you.
That's yes, absolutely, 100%, 100%. Um, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed
Yeah,
it immensely, and we can do it again. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
are you familiar with the? Oh, forget the name of the firm, but they're the firm that does the marketing for uh, Dallas Jenkins and the Chosen. I
Yeah.
forget, they're in Canada. They're in Alberta. You should get to know them if you don't know them already. I can provide an introduction if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And
Do you know what they're called? Are they called Brandhaven?
no, it's something else. Starts with an A.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
find. I'll go back and look. In fact, I talked to the man this morning. Actually, they're in Alberta. They're the same time zone as us here in Boise, only they're
Yeah.
north of us. And but I mean, he was telling some interesting stories about some similar things that you're involved in, like that. They do primarily film work, um,
Hmm.
and they do a lot of capital campaigns, and they serve more as a and what a how did he say? They serve as the sort of interpreter between the production company for The Chosen and the studio. And I
Hmm.
said, "You mean they have friction between those two things?" Like, of course they're going to have friction. by definition, they're going to have friction. Um,
Right.
so anyway, so that's I thought that was interesting. Have you seen any of The Chosen?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I love the show for
Okay.
sure.
I'm only going through, I'm in what, season 4, I think now. I understand there's a whole 7 year, 7 seasons that's planned for this thing.
Yeah.
Um, I, and I'm thinking, okay, well now here's how far they are
Yeah, right. How
already.
are they going to get
How are they going to
Yeah.
stretch 3 more years out of this thing?
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
okay, all right, well, we'll find and see, because they've gone through
Yeah,
some of the major milestones already.
right.
And I'm going, okay, well, we'll just see.
I think they're
Um,
planning on going into acts and um stories from beyond the
oh, so
death of Jesus.
post
Yeah.
crucifixion. Okay.
That's what I've heard. I don't know for sure, but that's the word on the street. So,
Well, we'll see.
yeah.
We'll see. Marcelino, take care of yourself,
Thank you.
please. You're a young man. All right.
Yeah.
And we'll be in touch very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been having a wonderful time talking to Marcelino D'Ambrosio, or Mark, if you prefer that, sir.
No, I
And
don't.
all right, he doesn't prefer it. Okay, great. Okay. And he's been sharing his vision, his history, and what he hopes to achieve in the future. Thank you, Mark, very much.
All right. Thank you, Larry.
Marcelino.